Thank you, Mr Davies, and a pleasure to serve under your chairship. On behalf of the third party, I would like to associate myself and my colleagues with the Transport Select Committee presentation and the Chair's speech, and to support the general thrust of the discussion that we've been having here today. I don't think we can understate the gratitude that we should express to the many hundreds of organisations who provide this service throughout the country, and in particular to the many thousands of volunteers who are involved in the boards of these charities, who are involved in running the service, and who quite often are actually sitting at the wheel providing the service itself. These are the dedicated community heroes who we should be lauding. We should be saluting these people. We should be encouraging them. It is the role of government, I would suggest, to nurture and enable and provide support for people who want to provide this service in their community. And I regret that we seem to have got ourselves into a situation where this Department of Transport consultation exercise is leaving many of those people feeling devalued and in many ways frightened about the future of the service in which they're engaged. In my own city of Edinburgh, we have a very good community transport service. There are 5 main providers operating in a public sector partnership with the local authority. In my own constituency, the South Edinburgh Amenities Group and Lothian Community Transport provide an excellent service. And I think I have to say also that this service is not just a matter of transporting people from A to B. The whole nature, the whole rationale behind the service is that it provides a vital social and caring service to those people in our community who need it. You cannot understate, I believe, the importance of this service in preventing and overcoming the social isolation that many people would otherwise feel. And this service is vital, not just to providing material physical help to people, but also to allowing them to live their lives to a fuller extent and better than would otherwise be the case. And community transport is, after all, the service that is provided on an individual level that gets to the places that normal transport services do not or cannot reach. And it quite often doesn't involve just doing to the door, it involves getting people through the door with assistance to actually physically get into the vehicle, something that normal operators simply could not provide. So I am very disturbed about the process that's underway. And I think there's some really confused thinking in this as well. I mean, in particular, this attempt to try and redefine, after all these years, the notion of the word commercial, and to suggest that simply by virtue of the fact that money is paid to a service, irrespective of who is paying it and who is receiving it, that that in itself renders an operation commercial. That seems to me to just turn on the head what most normal right-thinking people believe as what is a commercial operation. A commercial operation, for most people, is one in which an operator engages in supplying a service in order to make a profit. That is what the normal meaning of commercial is. And organisations that do this not for profit, explicitly not for profit, should not be regarded as commercial and should be exempted from the requirements of Section 19 and 22 simply on that basis. But an even more bizarre suggestion is that the definition as to whether or not this exemption will be applied or not is left for a private operator to decide. That actually it's only in circumstances where a private operator says they might be interested in running the service that the community transport operator will be obliged to go into the new licensing regime. And I find that really quite simply bizarre. So you can actually have a situation whereby, on the one hand, a community transport operator is regarded as commercial simply because they receive payment from the local authority or someone else providing the service, yet on the other hand, if there's no private sector interest, they could be exempted on the grounds of being non-commercial. So at the one and the same time, they can be both commercial and non-commercial. This is a policy of which Schrödinger would be very proud, I think, but it has no part in the planning of public transport. I think also you have to understand what the effect of this will be, because if this goes ahead, then I think we will see many community transport operators faced with higher costs to try and fit with the new licensing regime, which they've never had before. But more importantly, I think a lot of the volunteers who are running these organisations will simply say, well, this isn't why we got into this. We didn't get into this to be a commercial operator and to operate on this basis, and they will simply give up. And you will see a collapse in community transport organisation providers. That will leave a gap in service, and that will drive up the costs to the local authority or anyone else who needs to provide that service. Yes, I'll take
On that
it.
specific point, would you also not agree that many of the volunteer drivers would be extremely put off by having to undergo all the onerous training to get the additional certification, and that many, many people will simply walk away if they are required to actually go through all this additional certification?
Tommy Shepherd.
I couldn't agree more. That's another reason why I think the effect of this policy, if we drive these community transport operators to, if we oblige them to try and jump through these new hoops and this red tape, then I think many people are just going to say, well, that's not what I want to do. I want to serve my community. I don't want to do this. So, and I really think the department ought to be responsive to that. Mr. Davis, a couple of final observations here. One is that I cannot be the only person who finds it bizarre that the suggested rationale for why this is happening now is a desire by some officials within the department to suddenly comply better with the regulations of the European Union. We are, after all, 47 weeks away from being led out of the European Union by this government, and where it hopes to free itself from the shackles that are imposed upon it by these and many other European Union regulations. So why this sudden outbreak of Europhilia at the 11th hour of our membership of the European Union? It doesn't really add up, and I think this is probably a smokescreen for some other agenda which is going on in the department. The other observation is that, I know I'm the only Scottish MP here, but as I've researched for this debate and read into it, I have to confess I do find it rather bizarre that we have a situation in my city where the roads along which the community minibus travels are regulated and paid for by the Scottish Government, and the people inside the bus are taken to health and social care facilities which are regulated and legislated for by the social government, and yet the Scottish Government has no oversight on whether or not the operator should have a licence or not to drive the bus. That seems to me to be something of an inadequacy in the devolution settlement, and I do hope that the next time we get to review the competences of the devolved administrations, we might consider a little bit more joined up thinking in that regard to at least get the settlement internally consistent so that all aspects of public policy can be integrated. Mr Davis, let me finish with this. I've been in many of these Westminster Hall debates now, and usually they are much more collegiate than the exchanges we have in the main chamber, but I don't think I've seen one yet that has this degree of unanimity in terms of the views that have been expressed by members right across the House. And I say to the Minister, who is an admirable fellow, I know that his fingerprints are not on this particular consultation, but he has a golden opportunity now, a golden opportunity to rein in his department and to simply say stop to whoever is driving this policy, and to recognise in public policy and in government action the importance and the uniqueness of community transport providers the length and breadth of this country.